Hello and welcome to episode 4 of Turn-Based Memories. My name, once again, is Mel, and you'll shortly be hearing from my co-host, Zoltan. What about? Well, this month we've taken a break from the single game format to give you something a bit more broad. It's our personal lists of RPG sins. Habits of old role-playing games we find irredeemable, outdated, frustrating, time-wasting, and otherwise unneeded in a quality game. We'll be returning to our single-game format next month, but for now, stick with us as we list off our top 10 RPG sins, and given the name of our channel, we will, of course, be proceeding in a turn-based manner. For episode 4 of Turn-Based Memories. For my first sin, no stat comparisons or bad stat comparisons when shopping. Listeners of the Final Fantasy IV or Dragon Warrior 1 episodes will know this as a bugbear of mine, where RPGs simply refuse to give you all of the essential information about the items you're buying. Maybe the game tells you who can equip the item, maybe the game tells you if you're already wearing the item, maybe it's generous enough to tell you how one or two of your core stats will change when you equip the item. Not good enough. If I'm buying something, I want to know all the information the game has to tell me. There's no reason to hold back anything otherwise normally accessible to you in the game. Right now, I'm playing through the PC remaster of Final Fantasy XII, and it's a lovely game. It tells you how physical and magical defenses are affected by your new equipment, but it doesn't tell you how all the other stats are affected. Sinful.
Hey, the legendary Zoltan here to tell you 5 horribly horrible practices that nearly every goddamn RPG still does today. I just play the games and I see these things. After 35,000 years of console RPGs coming out, nobody that actually develops them thought to get rid of this stuff. The 5 things I have chosen for you today are so egregious, you will definitely agree with me about all of them. If you don't see these things as huge problems, then maybe you just haven't seen huge things before. I'd recommend by starting with huge boobies. Just search for it on google.com, huge boobies. Let's start my list off with the one that I mentioned way back on this channel's first video. Number 1, and these aren't in any particular order. Number 1, dedicated battle music. I have heard some people talk about this, but it's obviously not enough, because nearly every goddamn game still does it. And it's been 35,000 years! The problem with having dedicated battle music is not what people think it is. It's not that you end up hearing the same song over and over again for 60 hours. It's not the Dragon Quest thing, where the area music restarts from the beginning after every battle. No, if that were still happening, I would cite that as the biggest issue. But games thankfully stopped doing that during the SNES era. No, the problem with dedicated battle music is that it cuts in suddenly, interrupting the area music. Then the victory fanfare cuts in to interrupt the battle music, and then it cuts back to the area music. And all these cuts and interruptions do affect the immersion in a negative way. Much more so than having a screen transition, if you ask me. Go play Dragon Quest VIII on the PlayStation 2. Go into the options menu and turn the music all the way off. Now go grind for a bit, and you will see how much better it feels. Now go play Final Fantasy XII. That is one of the greatest grinds in RPG history because you can fight all the battles you want with excellent uninterrupted music all the way to the end of the game. It's one of the things that makes action RPGs so enjoyable. The solution is simple. You don't need hectic or exciting music for every battle. Just don't change the music. Keep the area music playing throughout the screen transition and throughout the battle, And then a battle in the snow area will feel much more different from a battle in the desert area. There is one very famous game that does exactly this in the very first dungeon. Go play the opening reactor section in Final Fantasy VII. After you jump off the train and fight those first two guys, you can just imagine how much shittier it would feel if it had cut to the battle music. They should have done that with the entire game.
For my second sin, forced deaths that cause you to blow all of your good items on an unwinnable fight. This one can be a tough one to complain about because sometimes an unwinnable fight makes for a very cool part of the game, but not if it comes at the expense of me blowing all my healing items and then needing to run through the fight again in don't try mode just so I don't lose essential inventory to a cool plot point. Xenosaga Episode 1 almost pulled this off in a meaningful way by pitting you against a very tough boss that you can win if you're really good at the battle system, or really overleveled, I suppose, and your reward is really nice accessory equipment. But there's still no indication that dying in this fight won't give you a game over screen, and you're still likely to blow a bunch of useful items trying to win. Highly sinful.
Number 2 from the Zoltan list is level, ability, stat, and damage caps. We don't need them. If we have enough strength to do more than 9,999 damage, why can't the developers let us do it? The first argument to be made is that it unbalances the game, but I say that argument is invalid in most cases because 1, most JRPGs can be exploited or broken in one way or another anyway. 2, you usually can't deal that kind of damage until the end of the game. And 3, bitches can balance the game for however much damage you're doing. That's their job. Particularly egregious examples of this are the East series, where the level cap is often 32. Star Ocean, where you could make items that will boost your stats well beyond the cap if they would only let you. And of course, Final Fantasy, where you constantly see damage numbers of 9,999. I also don't like when your characters can't eventually learn all of the abilities. The biggest offender for this is Dragon Quest VIII in my book. If we've put in the 200 hours it takes to reach level 99, give us enough skill points to learn the rest of the abilities. At that level, everything is destined to die by my hand. You're not preserving any challenge or game balance by keeping me locked out of those other abilities.
For my third sin, a large pool of playable characters that don't level up when not in combat, but are all still necessary. So what do I mean by necessary? I mean, you're given more playable characters to pick from than you can hold in your battle party at once. And then later in the game, all of the cast members get split up, and you're left with a hobbled party half comprised of that healer you never used, and that redundant DPS character whose backstory is boring. A ton of games are guilty of this, and it seems like a nice thing to give you more playable characters, but not if you have to risk screwing yourself later on. Who am I supposed to be leveling up? How should I rotate? Should I grind with my secondary characters? What a sinful waste of time.
Number 3 from my list is having a free camera. Since games have become 3D, people have been all about that freely rotatable camera. It was pretty good in Xenogears, but that's about it. This is another sin where the problem is not what people think. Everybody thinks the problem is that the camera gets stuck on walls and all up in your face when inside of tight spaces. But I put that at the bottom of the list. The problem is that your entire game experience becomes blurry, literally blurry, because the camera is always moving. When you're walking straight forward, it's not that noticeable, but if you were to look down at the bottom of the screen where the ground is moving the fastest, it is blurry. But every time you turn a corner, the camera auto-corrects itself, and during that entire rotation, the game environment is one big blurry-ass mess. So one fix for this could be to set the camera to always point north, and let the player run up, down, left, right instead of simply going forward. But that plan doesn't fix another problem I have. The camera in every goddamn game does not zoom out enough. The main appeal of the third-person viewpoint is that you can see all around the character, but the camera's too close to get, a far enough view to make it worthwhile. One of the best cameras in terms of zoom out distance is the one in Star Ocean 4: The Last Hope. At least when you're outside, you can zoom out pretty far and it feels really good. If we could lock the camera in place and prevent it from auto-correcting itself to always follow behind you, it would be one of the greatest game cameras of all time. However, allowing us to zoom out and lock the camera is still inferior to my final solution. The best cameras you can find in all of gaming are not in RPGs. They are in Castlevania, Lords of Shadow, and Metal Gear Solid 3, Snake Eater. These are pre-programmed cameras. The player can't control them. And unless controlling the camera is supposed to be part of the fun, the player shouldn't be controlling it. Every time a game has a free camera, it's a wasted opportunity to have a more creative, more fun, or just a better camera angle to show the action from. It's part of the reason I really like the PS1 Final Fantasies. Everything is not spinning around the character in a blurry mess. Program some camera angles into your game!
For my fourth sin. This may well be a universal problem in role-playing games, and I almost get where developers are coming from on this one. Your characters can't be exactly as strong as the enemies. That wouldn't be any fun. If you're thinking about the numbers, it's always way out of proportion for the sake of gameplay. The enemies always have way more HP than you do. You always deal way more damage than your enemies. And status effects are always way more effective on you than on enemies. This is fine, except for the fact that it just invalidates whole portions of your spell roster for most of the game. I can't really be blamed for just mindlessly attacking in role-playing games, rather than slowly finding out who's not immune to what. The only game I've played that comes close to getting this right is FF12, which has a ton of status effects, and most enemies aren't immune to them. Hardly any of them are immune to all of them. But it's still usually quicker to just smack them all with a big sword, and that's just sinful indeed.
RPG sin number 4 on the Zoltan list. Forcing players to unlock the hardest difficulty level. What do I even have to say about this? Just let me play on hard mode from the very beginning. I don't want to play the game 3 times to get the ultimate challenge, okay? I've got shit to do. I've got a full-time job to do. I've got a Japanese waifu to do, and kids to play with, and exercises to do, and dreams to make a reality. I'm busy. When I want to sit down and enjoy a nice, long, brutal grind, let me do it! Don't waste my time with less than the best playthroughs.
For my fifth and final sin, I could say something like unskippable cutscenes. I could say something like high encounter rates. I could say something like terrible voice acting. But we've all heard those complaints. We've all made those complaints. Instead, I'm going to pick on the nasty habit that many RPGs have of making their final dungeons into an arduous maze. Dragon Warrior 1 was basically an assemblage of dungeons that were designed that way, but I'm willing to forgive it, if only because it was made in the Stone Age of console gaming. But the trend stuck around, sadly, and became a developer favorite for sticking at the end of the game or right before the final boss fight. Worse still, they'd often give you a save and healing point right before that boss fight, almost like they couldn't commit to being that harsh as to make you repeat the whole maze, but they still wanted to be pricks by not just cutting the maze out entirely. What does it do for the game? What does passing through it prove for me as a player? Did I have a lot of time on my hands? When were all these spatial memory and sense of direction skills required in the rest of the game? An old and sinful habit, if ever there was one.
And finally, my fifth and actually not final sin that RPGs are still committing today is joyless treasure chests. If you want to give the players the weakest healing item in the game, or an insignificant amount of gold coins, don't put it in a treasure chest! Finding a treasure chest should be the most exciting thing that happens during exploration. Games on the whole need to have far less treasure chests. Trivial things can always be placed in barrels, or pots, or grandfather clocks. Treasure chests, on the other hand, should be a huge fucking deal. Games that have decent treasure chest contents are Dragon Quest VIII, and that's it? Hashtag make treasure chests great again. And welcome to the third segment of Turn-Based Memories, Episode 4. This is the unscripted segment where Mel and I both go back and forth talking about our different sins. So, the first sin we're going to talk about is Mel's first sin, and that was inability to compare stats with the equipment that you're going to buy at shops. And since you've already talked about it in your segment, I'll react to it first. No games that I've played recently actually come to mind when I think about this. Like, most of them seem okay. One that's good, in my opinion, is Xenogears, which you haven't played. But basically, it's very simple. Just there's a window at the bottom to say what the item does. And then there's a icon of your characters, of all your characters. There are all the icons of your characters. And it just says either a red number or a blue number. And opposite of most games, though, the red number is going up in stat increase rather than a decrease. So that was a good one. I can't think of any game I've played in a long time where, like, I don't know if it's better or worse.
I mean, Final Fantasy, was it Final Fantasy 6 that I was going on about, where it was like, am I buying an upgrade? Like, I had to assume, based on, like, I'm guessing they're only going to hand me upgrades as I continue through the game, but
that was
in
4.
that game I was kind of 4.
Yeah.
Sorry, I got the Roman numerals backwards. But yeah, it was, I think because I got sort of turned around a bit in that game, but still, they should have showed you either what the actual stats were, or in the case of, like, spells that you had in your own, that you already knew, it wouldn't tell you what they did. Even though they had that sub-window for what items would do, it would never tell you, like, just use the same, you can do it, it's possible, they've already done it before.
Yeah.
So it's like,
yeah. I mean, what is there to say other than, let us see it?
Yeah, they should. More information is always better, and sometimes just like, and I think this also covers, like, excessive UI, like, usage, having to back out, back in, not being able to equip stuff in the shop menu, just general wastes of my time or guesswork.
You've actually made me think of a couple others. So, like, another good one is Chrono Trigger, which also you said you haven't played. You can see all the stat creases right there on, like, a window down below. But I've been playing Star Ocean 5, and that one, you have to, it's a brand new game. I mean, it's a PS4 game. That, in terms of brand new, it's this generation anyway. And you have to push the square button to compare. There's a compare button, which is nice, but I prefer they just have them all, like, listed down at the bottom somewhere. That'd have been better. But another one. Have you played Final Fantasy Tactics even?
I have not. No,
Okay,
that's definitely got to get thrown on our list.
Yeah, that's coming your way in the future. And that one has the a brand new thing that no other game has. It's called, I think it's just Try On, where you actually step into a fitting room like in a clothing store, and you just put on whatever you want, and you see all the status change and stat changes, in, like, your normal equip menu, basically. And then at the end you say, okay, do you want to buy all this stuff? It'll cost such and such money, and then you say yes, right?
Yeah, there are certain games, especially when it comes to a game's cosmetic effect on your equipment. I know a lot of the RPGs we've been playing don't have that as a factor, but newer games definitely do. And being able to try them all on, especially in, like, an MMO, is a thing that a lot of games are very conscious of and let you see what it really actually looks like on your character.
Yeah.
So just like it is largely reserved to old games, but not that old. Like PS2 games, there's a lot of games like Final Fantasy 12 only tells you a couple of the stats that upgrade, but not like if it increases your evasion. Like usually that's the reason you would buy a certain item, but it doesn't even tell you that unless you actually buy it. So it's like,
Yeah. That's gotta be
or if
crazy.
you're already wearing something and you're looking to shop for an upgrade, it'll show it as, yeah, this thing is better. But the reality is what you're wearing has maybe a couple points less defense or something, but way more evasion. Doesn't even show you that.
Yeah.
So it just makes shopping obnoxious and a ton of backing out of menus, going into other menus. It's a waste of time.
Star Ocean 2 has a really unique thing called the Equipment Wizard, where you get an item as soon as you get out of, like, for example, you get it from a treasure chest. As soon as the "you got such and such from this treasure chest" message disappears, automatically you equip such and such. You equip it if it's better.
Oh, wow.
Which is cool, but like once you get past like the halfway point, you can't use it anymore because it's like what you said. It's like +2 defense, but like way less evasion or something. So I'd rather have
the game isn't smart enough. There's an optimization button in a lot of like Final Fantasy games that I never trust.
yeah. FF6 has that, and it has.
Yeah.
It's one of those games where all the equipment has lots of special effects, so it doesn't really work that often. Okay. Oh, one question. If the armor doesn't look as cool, or if the armor looks better to you, but it's slightly less defensive, would you still equip that one, or would you go with
I've totally made the aesthetic choice over the functional choice before. I have totally done that. Absolutely. I'm like,
Me too.
This shitty like jungle armor doesn't look as cool as my early like Iron Knight armor. I'm gonna wear that instead.
Yeah, me too. Okay. Next sin was my sin. The one that I mentioned way back on the first episode. Dedicated battle music. Anything to say about that?
When we were talking about it, I wasn't expecting you to make the point that I already wrote down in response. Like I was writing as I was listening to your piece, and you were like, turn the battle music off, and you'll notice how much more like a pleasant an experience it was. And as a person who composes music yourself, I was like, man, I never thought he would advocate removing music.
Yeah.
I mean, but I totally get it. And I was going to make that point as like a counterpoint or like a solution to offer. Like, I think removing music sometimes is for the best because I have done that, especially in games that I have spent a ton of time in. Like, I played for maybe 2 or 3 years. I played the MMO Final Fantasy 14.
Oh, you did? Wow.
And, yeah. And, the music in that game is really good, but you hear it so often, and it does tend to get interrupted whenever because it's an MMO, everything happens on the field, like you're not zooming away.
Well, that sounds good.
Sure, but the music does transition when you enter battle.
Oh, it
but
does.
Also, it just whenever you enter combat, the music does change for your perspective. But also, you hear it so often. And it all wears so thin that I turned it off, and just the ambient sound of like the wind and your footsteps and the sound of combat was way more consistent and made it all feel really realistic in a really cool way.
I knew it. Yeah, and like in the case that I made, the example I made with Dragon Quest VIII, that game has amazing, beautiful, full like real live orchestra music. And it's like, I'm going to turn that off, but you turn it off, and you don't have to hear that freaking dun at the beginning of every battle.
Like every time.
Yeah.
It does get very wear on you.
And when they were, so you know that I like Star Ocean, so I followed the release and all the news of Star Ocean 5 up until release, and they were like, no screen transitions anymore. We're going to go, not open world, but we're going to do everything on the map. And I was like, well, that's going to be awesome. But, and it took them, they actually ended up delaying the game just 1 month to get that all ironed out. Cause if you've never done that, I guess that's pretty hard to do. And, I don't know what they achieved by not having a screen transition, is not as good, in my opinion, as what they would have achieved had they not changed the goddamn music every time you enter the battle.
Yeah, I guess that's like an oversight. Like, we gotta have battle music, and then they're like,
Yeah.
ooh, we can't remove it. When do we remove it? So instead of probably making the better choice of just not having battle music, they stick with it because it's convention. It probably works well enough the first time, like the first half of the game even.
Yeah,
But
maybe.
if
Yeah,
you're gonna play more, like if you're gonna finish the game, it becomes a problem.
it does.
And it's consistency. It's all about like just making it feel like the entire. It doesn't break it up in a way, even though you are like transitioning to another screen in a lot of these games. There would be sort of a continuity of action if you didn't have to worry about just like all of these sound cues breaking up your, just like jamming up your mental experience. And I think that has a
Yeah.
humongous effect. And advocating turning off the music in some of these games is something I consider doing a lot. I've only done it really with a couple games, including, like I said, Final Fantasy XIV. But I'm going to try that more often now and see how that changes things.
Yeah, and if I remember correctly, I think Final Fantasy X HD version, maybe just the PS3 version, when it first came out, every time you went into battle or finished the battle, the area music restarted. I heard. That must have
Yeah,
been hell.
that is one of your old complaints, and I didn't realize that until you mentioned it, and then after that, I was like, "Oh, this is obnoxious."
Yeah, they patched it though, so thank God.
Oh, that's
right?
good.
Yeah, I didn't have to deal with that. Okay, next sin was your sin, and that was unwinnable fights. And this is not one that's really hurt me too much. I have used items, but they were just normal healing items and stuff, and that is a loss of money right there. But I find that in most cases, the enemy is strong enough to just wreck you, and you can't use that many items before you hit the game over. So yeah, it doesn't really bother me. I have a friend who has a problem with that as well, and he mentioned a long time ago an unwinnable fight in a game I will have you play someday in the future, Star Ocean 2 for the PS1. You fight a dude, and it's an unwinnable fight. And I don't know. He wrecks you. Like it's just a mind blow. How much grinding did that friend of mine do to stand a chance to have any time to use items? Because he destroys you like in 2 hits. I don't know how much he must have leveled up insanely. And he said that he went back on a subsequent playthrough and leveled up to like literally double the level that you would normally be, and still died. He wanted to try.
Is it a winnable fight at all? Can you
I don't
possibly
think it is.
win?
No, I don't think you can
Okay.
possibly win. Yeah. By the way, what?
So
Yeah.
go ahead.
I just want to know, which fight is it in Xenosaga that you can win if you're able?
Do you remember who Captain Margulis was?
Oh yeah. Oh, is it the one in the beginning?
It's in pretty early when you're playing as Ziggy with
And
Momo.
Momo,
You're
yeah.
breaking Momo out. Yeah.
That's right. That's right. You can win that. I didn't know that.
Can win that, and you get like a little accessory thing. And I got close because usually in an unwinnable boss fight, you don't deal any damage or
Yeah.
you just get one shot. But he was just like a really, really hard boss. So
you
it was
thought
like
you had to
riding
win.
this fine line. Yeah, I was getting like there were no context clues. And I'm not sure if I did this, but I suspect I may have restarted before I actually died, not realizing the game would continue. Because, like,
Right.
I'm not going to waste my time. I lost this one. Let me restart.
Yeah. Don't watch the game over screen. Why bother, right?
Yeah, I guess.
What was I going to ask you just now? Okay, I forgot. I'm sorry.
Well, I think one of the reasons I raised up this point was it may just be a part, like a confluence of the exact experiences I had with role-playing games. In Skies of Arcadia, there's like 3 or 4 unwinnable boss fights
Oh,
that
man.
are clear or unclear, more or less on how true that circumstance is. Like the boss will take damage, but sometimes their health bar doesn't move, or sometimes it doesn't move a lot. So it's not like certain, and you usually either have to tough out the fight, like you have to survive, long enough before the game decides the plot can progress, or you do have to just die. And it's different. In one game, they do it two different ways. Even though that's one of my favorite games ever, it's like on first blush, that was very confusing. And there was another game I'm forgetting right now, but it did something very similar where Grandia 2 has an unwinnable boss fight when you fight your brother Melphis. And you can actually, these are all old games that you can use like those cheat systems on.
Yeah.
And you can actually win those. They have programmed endings. You can actually win a lot of those fights, which is always interesting. Usually it breaks the game somehow.
Yeah. That's cool. Yeah, the worst feeling in the world is the opposite feeling where you're fighting a normal boss. You get you're getting like hammered really badly and you're doing all you can to survive. And it's like, am I just supposed to lose this battle? And you're supposed to beat it.
I've been there. And it's just like, wait, it's just a game over screen. Are you kidding?
Yeah. And another one that just came to mind listening to you speak was the game I like called Rogue Galaxy by Level 5. That's on the PS2.
I never played that. I came close to buying it a couple times.
I really like it. It is just a grind. I mean, it's got a story, but it's mostly just running and grinding. And there's a recurring boss fight in there, and they do the kind of the opposite thing. Like, it kind of annoyed me in my most recent playthrough of it, where you just have to survive, and then the battle is over. So that implies that this boss I'm fighting is really powerful, and there's no way I can beat him. But I was totally wrecking him. He was like, 30% of his health, and he's like, okay, I'll let you guys live for another day, and he ran away. God damn it, I was going to destroy him. So that happened. Okay, next sin was my second sin, and that was stat caps, ability caps, level caps, and damage caps. What's your opinion?
I think it's a really good point about like balance. Like it's like trying to have your cake and eat it too with these stat caps. Like either break the stat cap or don't balance your game out so that you can so easily get to that threshold of the stat cap. Like which program your game one way or the other. I do agree. I think that is kind of annoying. I do. The one exception to that, maybe you disagree, is how Final Fantasy tends to handle it as a actual mechanic. Sometimes there's an item that you can equip that lets you break that old school stat cap of 9999.
Yeah.
So they kind of play with that as like a trope.
Yeah. That's true, yeah.
But otherwise, like I wouldn't say I'm like super bummed because I tend not to like 100% my role-playing games because they are often the most egregious, like grind your face off, dodge 100 lightning bolts to get a mediocre sword.
Yeah.
I tried that until I was like, this is dumb. But I know a lot of people do. I know a lot of there are a handful of role-playing games that I have played that were I spent enough time to do that with, but it really takes, even for non-role-playing games, something very special for me to dedicate that much time. So I guess I just don't run up to those limits very often. Yeah. And I guess that's why developers didn't bother, because they what tiny sliver of their audience, right?
Yeah, I don't know. In lots of games that I've played, it's happened. Really, what bothers me more than damage caps, though, is I don't know. In the case of Star Ocean 4 is a game that I've played a lot. The max level is 255 in Star Ocean games, and I can freaking hit it. And the way you can hit it is because that game has a crafting system. It's one of the things that made it stand out way back when it first came out, because it was one of the first ones at least. And so you could use it. You could use the crafting system to create all this experience increasing armor and weapons, and then fight whatever the hardest battle is, and just start rocketing the levels. And it's like, that's it, I'm done. I could keep going. Come on. And since there are mega bosses in Star Ocean that will totally wreck your face, like, it's insane how strong they are. I want to be able to go further and make the that challenge a little more, I don't know, endurable, I guess. But that's the thing about Star Ocean games, though, and in Tri-Ace games in general, is it's all about offense and hardly about defense. Almost all Tri-Ace games are like that. So
I can agree.
You've played some,
yes.
right? Yeah.
Yes, I have.
Yeah. But even more than all that stuff, the thing that really annoys me most is ability caps. Like, Final Fantasy X doesn't do it. You can learn everything if you want with everyone, and that's cool. But, like, I don't know, the game that comes to mind right now... Oh, so, like, the new...
Dragon Quest.
That's right, yeah. That was the biggest one. It was Dragon Quest 8. It's, like,
yeah.
level 99, and I still can't learn all the abilities? Come on!
Yeah, no, I fully agree. Like, you should be able to get that. Like, what your point was perfect. Like, who are you balancing the game for at this point?
Yeah, exactly. Okay. All right, next sin. Mel's third sin was that characters that don't level up outside of combat, and let me tell you, a whole new world of that problem that you haven't experienced. Have you played both Tri-Ace games, Radiata Stories or Valkyrie Profile 2?
Nope, neither.
Oh my god, dude. Actually, Valkyrie Profile 2 has one of the coolest systems ever for leveling up outside characters, but they don't level up outside of the battle. They don't, and there are tons of them. But luckily, you're not forced to use any of them, so it doesn't really commit the sin in the way that you're mentioning it. Radiata Stories, if I remember the number correctly, has 45 recruitable characters.
Man.
Yeah, and they're all like random, and most of them are very easily missable. So it's just kind of a, how badly do you want to get them all and search for them all and use guides to get them all. But you don't need them all, right? There's like 2 main characters, and then everybody else is just for fun, and they all fight slightly differently, so use whoever you want. But yeah, none of those characters level up outside of battle. I don't believe, anyway.
Yeah, I mean, that probably would bug me, even though they're not necessary, like you were saying. But it is especially like a sin, I think, and fits the term when they like suddenly, your party split up. Like Xenosaga does this, I think, to a degree later on.
Oh yeah, I think they do. Yeah.
Where
do they level up outside of battle though?
I think they gain. Remember, the first one has like 1,000 different like types of combat points that you earn. It's obnoxious. I think they earn either a percentage of those or all of those, but no XP. I forget.
Okay, so they don't get something, right?
They get
don't get
something.
Of something.
Of experience.
I mean, in general, they're missing something by not being in battle, right?
Yeah, they are. They're missing something by not being in battle. And they split up your party in a way that, I guess if you didn't rely on someone, and it's not too bad because a lot of that game is very linear, so they kind of tailored it to letting you do whatever you want to do. But there are other games like Final Fantasy XII where before I started playing, finished that game rather, I wasn't sure, what should I be doing when I played that for the first time, because you don't gain experience out of battle, you gain license points out of battle.
Yeah.
And now I realize you really don't have to worry about who you level up. You
you
can
don't.
pick whoever you like. Right.
Yeah. And they have an old school mechanic in that game. It's like PlayStation 1 era mechanics, where, before the character joins your party, their level is based on the main character. So when you're just Vaughn in the beginning, you go level up a bunch. When you get Fran, her name's Fran and Balthier, they're like his level +2, so you don't have to worry about it.
Oh, I don't think I ever noticed.
Yeah, so people do this crazy thing where there's a rare monster that will die instantly if you use a Phoenix down on it and give you tons of... It's like when you go find it at level 2, you'll instantly go up to level 5. It's that much experience, right?
Nice.
So they'll level up the guy to level 20, and then boom, you're set for a third of the game.
Interesting. Yeah, that game has a lot of interesting exploits, but that's another topic entirely.
Exploits are another topic. You're right. I'm sorry. Okay. Next sin was my third sin, and this one drives me crazy. A free camera. How do you feel about free cameras? They're popular.
So this is interesting. They're very popular. The concept of a free camera is almost like a non-topic because of how common they are. Free camera, of course. You don't have a pre-rendered camera or static camera angle, or certainly not pre-rendered backgrounds. That's an old school solution to graphical limitations.
Yeah.
Even though I like pre-rendered backgrounds.
I do
I
too.
think they look nice. But no, since they dropped that, they said, well, why not let the player rotate the camera around? So when I was listening to talk about that, I had a couple questions.
Okay.
Do you play any first-person shooters, or do you really hate them, possibly?
I'm generally not a fan of
Mm-hmm.
particularly first-person shooters, and
Mm-hmm.
mostly the reason is that they are in the first-person viewpoint. Now,
Mm-hmm.
there is one game that's in the first-person viewpoint that I played and I love, but that was an RPG, and that was the Elder Scrolls 4 Oblivion. And,
Okay.
and to be honest, it took me forever to get used to the first-person viewpoint. And I'm kind of used to it now. Like, it doesn't bother me as much, but in third person, it's horrible, in my opinion. It's worse in third
That
person.
game, yes, it is. It wasn't
No,
designed
I mean
for it.
just in general, free cameras. When,
Free
when you have to
cameras,
spin them
yeah.
around in third person, I think the effect is even
Interesting.
worse.
So, has the game ever made you motion sick before? Have you ever felt that way?
Not
No.
greatly, not to
Okay.
a serious degree. I remember back.
Because
in the day,
yeah, go ahead.
yeah, like I read an interview with Hideo Kojima, the creator of Metal Gear, and he said that one of the reasons that he hesitated to put a free camera in Metal Gear 3, which he did in a subsequent version, in a later version
Yes.
of it, right? The subsistence version or something.
Yes.
He said his original reason, one of the original reasons not to have that in the original version, was that he also gets like 3D sickness when he plays those kind of games.
Right.
So
Yeah, I don't know if that's just like I think the more you play first-person shooters, the more you get used to that. And I know first-person shooters aren't very popular in Japan, so a lot of Japanese players tend to complain about motion sickness in games, and role-playing games tend to have overall less of that movement around, even though they do have a lot of free cameras still happening. But for a long time, they didn't. So
But-
you didn't have to worry about that in that
yeah.
genre.
But well, 3D sickness aside, that's not my problem with it. My
Right.
problem
No,
with
I
it
was
is that
asking that as a
objects
general.
in motion are freaking blurry. And when I was younger, I thought I had like a problem with my eyes. Like I thought
Huh.
when things are moving and they're blurry like that, like what have I been playing too many video games in my life and my eyes are dying? No, when things are moving, they are blurry. I found out through experience.
Yes.
And so, yeah, the more that the camera moves around, the worse it is.
So the only reason I guess I was driving at those questions is because this is a thing that does not bother me at all. Like, and
Really?
I think it doesn't bother. Yeah, it doesn't come to the attention of or annoy. I think probably a lot of people. I'm sure. I know that it does bother a lot of other people. Like I said, I was trying to figure out why maybe that was the case for you, because, for instance, the whole motion sickness thing. But also, if you just don't like that kind of movement around of the camera, like in first-person games, that would be another reason if that movement just bugs you.
No, it's
But
the
it's not a thing I
blurriness.
notice. Or, well, the movement that causes the blurriness, right?
Yeah. No, if they could move it and make everything still be clear, I would like it. Like
Well, there is like a motion blur effect that some games have that you can disable sometimes on some games.
yeah, so like that's interesting. Shadow of the Colossus, the remake, also
Uh-huh.
has the motion blur setting that you can set to how strong you want it, and you can even turn it all the way off. But so I tried it both ways, and when you set to the strongest setting, you can really see, oh, okay, this is the effect that they're putting on it when things move. Turn off the freaking effect, it just looks blurry in a different way, in a less artistic way. So, like, yeah, it's just objects in motion are blurry, and it drives me crazy.
That's interesting. I can't say, I mean, that's true, but I can't say that's ever really been a problem for me. However, I do also like what static camera angles bring to a game. I like that sort of, I don't know how to put it, but that particular kind of artistic design that
Yeah, it's
a
another
static
art,
camera
yeah.
angle, like it's like staring at a painting. And even if a game were to continue to use, like, could you imagine what a AAA game with pre-rendered backgrounds would look like today? That would look phenomenal,
That would
I
look really
think.
beautiful, yeah. That probably would look really amazing. But it doesn't bother you that when you're running through any area, every time you're going to turn, the camera's going to turn to go behind you to look forward. So any dungeon you're going through, the thing is just spinning all around you all the time. It doesn't bother you, huh?
No, it doesn't. Like I like third person over first person as a general rule for cameras if the camera is going to move. But no, I love shooters. I play a ton of those. So that stuff never really bothered me because that kind of movement and blurriness and everything is constantly present in those games. So it never really occurred to me like that this is a big thing until you sort of brought it to my attention. Like, yeah, this is very different now. But it still doesn't. I can't say that it actually ever bothered me. But
so it's not a sin in your mind.
No, I couldn't put it on my list, unfortunately.
Okay. Next sin was Mel's fourth sin, and that is enemy stats are not comparable to players' stats. And I've had this same thought in my mind as well, and I don't generally think of it as a sin either because they have to balance the game in whatever way they want to balance it. But one game that I thought kind of balances stats with your enemies really well was the Elder Scrolls 4 Oblivion, where every battle, before you learn all the different ways to destroy the game, when I first played it, I just went, okay, sword and shield, and like I used the basic tactics of block the enemy attack and then hit during the little opening. And, every battle doing that with just you one-on-one with a freaking tiger even was kind of a big deal. And if you ever got in a battle with 2 or more enemies, it was like a brutal struggle. And then, until you really learn how to use all the systems.
And it didn't bother you that everything leveled up with you in that game? That didn't feel like...
No, that did bother me.
It did, okay.
Yeah, I didn't want them to level up with me. But I really liked the way that every battle was brutal. And, I wish they would have just stayed the same so that when I get stronger, they don't get any stronger.
Okay, yeah. I guess that was partly an effect of them leveling up alongside you.
Yeah, well, as the game progresses on, they did that so that the player could could attack any quest in any order, and the game still gets harder and harder as you go through it, right?
Yeah.
I assume that's the reason anyway. And they do have that amazing difficulty slider with like literally 40 settings on it. It's a slider.
I never played that one.
Yeah, it's a slider, and so like you can stop it on anywhere on that huge line, and it's like 30 to 40 different places you can stop that difficulty slider. So it's amazing. But yeah, Final Fantasy VIII also does leveling up of the enemies. Yeah, I think like as much as I complain when like stuff gets too easy, I don't know. When I don't feel like I'm getting stronger than my surroundings, that annoys me a little bit more.
Well, there's a perfect balance that kind of has to get struck there. That's the tricky part, and I it's a hard thing to nail. But I think also aside from it was just like the nuances and the sort of annoying ways that developers sort of play with the stats to make certain things more or less effective versus you or the enemy. So with stat debuffs and buffs in particular, like the effectiveness on them on you versus the enemy, it always kind of annoyed me because if I have a stat debuff that is rarely effective, just don't give it to me. Like, I'm never going to use it. It's not worth my time experimenting. Is this one weak to poison? Like, I'm not going to do that.
Well, let's think about it. Okay, if they want to make the game where lots of enemies are weak to this, lots of enemies are weak to that, or their stats are very similar to yours, well, the battles would go way longer, wouldn't they? If you can kill enemies in 2 hits, that means enemies would also be able to kill you in 2 hits if you want to have comparable stats.
Well, yeah, no, in terms of like the defense and whatever, like I recognize that there's going to be a totally like player characters and regular enemy characters are built differently from the stat ground up. They have to be because it's you as a person versus an AI, so they have to be built differently.
So it's
but
more
when it comes to stuff like the debuffs in particular, that's where that mechanic of building characters differently, I think, goes off the rails. It was that particular point, and that gets accentuated more with lazy boss design, where they want you to experience all of the phases of the boss, so they basically disable whole swaths of your spell book so that you don't chunk the boss down too quick.
I see.
Because they didn't design their battle system with that in mind, so they just make the bosses mostly immune to most things. I'm like, well, then it just evolves into pressing attack every time.
Yeah.
And then finding the one thing they want you to do. And if there isn't an elegant way to have you find that thing, if it's just trial and error, then I'm not going to do it. Like, maybe that's my fault, but I'm just going to attack
That's a
them
good point.
and
Having
win.
an elegant way to do it. Because, yeah, in nearly every game, like, you could look up online later about a boss you fought. Oh, it was
Sure.
weak to this. But the
Yes.
only way to have known it is if I tried it, right?
Right.
And if there are a
then,
million
like,
things to try.
Right. Yeah. And sometimes there's, like, a good, effective way to scan an enemy and see if they're immune to something or weak to something.
Oh, yeah, scan. That's everything.
And yeah, scanning, I think, is a thing that a lot of games have implemented in one form or another to address this exact thing. But I don't know. It's a hard thing to balance out, but it just bugs me when they start just invalidating whole portions of the battle system to fit some sort of balancing criteria, usually with boss fights.
So, in the first Dragon Warrior game that you played, it turns out that no enemy... The only status effect in that game was sleep, right?
I think so, yeah.
Yeah, it turns out that the way that game was programmed, there is no enemy in the game that is completely immune to sleep. And it's a factor of 16, so the lowest chance, the highest immunity an enemy can have to sleep is 15 out of 16. It's not 16 out of 16. So if you got really, really lucky, that 1 out of 16 chance, you could sleep the final Dragon Lord and then wail on him.
I'm very impressed you remember those numbers off the top of your head.
I guess so, yeah. Why do I know that? You're right. Why do I
These
remember
are
the
games
numbers?
we loved, right?
I like numbers. Yeah. A game that I thought did debuffs really well, which is not a very popular game, was Final Fantasy 13 and 12 as well with the Gambit system. But basically, it comes down to like when it's your turn on a turn-based game. It's like, well, I just want to wreck the guy. I just want to damage him and kill him. I don't want to like take up turns doing buffs and debuffs because it feels like I'm not progressing, I guess is the reason. I'm not moving forward in the battle.
I have an okay time like understanding like, all right, now's the time to apply buffs. That can definitely become like a grind. In 12, it's easier because your characters sort of do that all for you, but when you have to press and menu through all the buttons, that can be more of a grind.
Yeah,
but,
have you played 13?
I have. I played the original 13 all the way through.
Yeah.
Not the other two.
Yeah, me too, just the original 13. And yeah, you have the Synergist and the Saboteur, and you could set them up to...
That's right. Oh my God,
mess
I
up
forgot
enemies.
about that game.
Yeah, and so I thought that was pretty cool. And I believe that they all worked on the enemies, and on the bosses. And Valkyrie Profile is another game where it just has it only has like defense up, defense down, that kind of just stat up, stat down kind of. There's poison, and that's the only status.
Yeah,
effect.
12 is the game that I know of that has the most status effects and the most different. There's like 3 different kinds of poison, and there's like all these. Like if you look at the actual stat listing of like debuffs and buffs, there's a ton of them, and a lot of them are like shades of different types of other ones, which I always thought was cool, and they are often effective. And they're easy to apply, and they're easy to tell when they apply for the most part.
Yeah.
So I think that's a game that sort of gets things right when it comes to this sort of stuff. And the bosses are designed to be vulnerable to status effects in a way that a lot of role-playing games, like bosses just do not get affected by any status buffs.
Totally.
It's maybe an elemental weakness at most.
Do Dark Souls and Demon Souls games allow bosses to get susceptible to like bleeding status and stuff like that? I can't remember.
Yeah.
They
do.
Awesome.
Yeah.
The difference in that game though is you choose one build, and so you only have like one status effect to work with, really, usually.
Yeah, and a lot of the status effects unfortunately, even though everything is vulnerable to everything more or less, they're not effective. Like you wouldn't want to poison a boss more or less. There are, I mean, without getting lost in the weeds, there are builds that are effective, but that game is mostly about just smashing stuff.
Okay, moving on. Next one was my fourth sin, and this. Oh my god. Okay, maybe this is the one that makes me the most angry of all of them. Having to unlock the hardest difficulty setting. What do you think, Mel?
I think that's I can't recall too many instances where I have had that problem because I tend to get intimidated by like hard mode. And unless I'm coming back to a game that I lost a clear file on or that, whatever the case is, I'm always perfectly fine starting on like quote unquote normal. So do you prefer to start games on like the highest difficulty available?
In the case of RPGs, yes, because you grind, and I want to feel to the highest degree how important the grind really is. And in some games, it's not that important. Like in Star Ocean games, the grind is not that important. The levels are not that important, is what I want to say. The equipment is very important. So, in lots of other games, the more you grind, the more it's very important to grind in some games, and I want to feel to the highest degree just how important it is to grind, and I want to have that feeling of. I want the bosses to be hard, is what I want. The thing is, I want like a hard difficulty for the bosses, and I want to hurry up and get to the point where I can just totally. Instantly kill the random battles, and
gotcha.
Yeah, and the feeling I want to have when I fight the boss is that it comes down to the Hail Mary, right? It's like, okay, all my potions, all my magic points are gone. This is going to be my last attack, and if he doesn't die, I'm dead. And then they die. That's what I want to get to. And
that is a really good feeling.
It is, right? That happened to me like twice in Dragon Quest VII. And it felt so good. I was so happy. So that game had a really good difficulty, but yeah, it doesn't have other settings, so that's actually a little bit off the topic. All Tri-Ace games have alternate difficulties where they just up the stats of all the enemies, their HP and their attack and their defense by some percentage. And if I'm going to be getting stronger and stronger and stronger throughout the game, and this is particularly true of open world games, I want the hardest one because, there are a million systems and a million enemies to kill and a million systems to use to make your guy stronger and stronger and stronger. It shouldn't be a cakewalk. I shouldn't be able to use just one of the systems and then steamroll everybody with that, right? I should have to use all of them. I see that. And I want to use I want to have to use all of them, and then it's like the challenge is just right. That's how I want it to be.
That's a really hard difficulty curve to nail.
I suppose it is, yeah.
Yeah, it must be because I so rarely ever experience that. I've been there where you're talking about, but most games either turn the corner too quick or are just like such an uphill grind that it isn't quite like rewarding and challenging. But I can't say I've ever launched a game for the first time and then said, "Give me hard mode." Like I've always, because I guess I get it in my head like, oh, this game was designed a certain way with a certain balance. They even usually put the word normal, and I'm like, well, is this not really the ideal experience if I play on hard? Is that just a challenge mode? Like, what is exactly different? They usually don't enumerate that in detail. So
in your defense,
I can't say I've done that too many times.
In the defense of everybody who doesn't care about playing hard mode the first time, a lot of times I play on hard mode, and I just get so annoyed with the small random battles taking too long that I stop playing on hard mode. But another angle to look at it is if you're a person who likes to try to get all the trophies, there's inevitably a trophy of clearing the game on the hardest difficulty.
Oh, yes.
And I don't want to have to go do all the previous ones before that. I like to do everything in one single epic, huge game playthrough is what I like to do.
Yeah, the unlocking a trophy for the earlier difficulties is like that should be another like sin appended to the list.
Yeah.
There are games that do it that way, and that's great, and there are games that definitely do not do it that way, and that is a waste of everyone's time.
Yeah. And then just a non-RPG example. Have you ever played Zone of the Enders 2?
No, I've watched a Let's Play of the original, and I don't think I may have seen video of the second,
If you
but I
want,
haven't played either.
if you want high-speed robot action, as the subtitle itself says,
Uh-huh.
it's a great game. And 2 is infinitely better than 1, like in nearly every respect. And I always want to play that game on the hardest mode, and the hardest mode I believe is extreme, or no, it's very hard, and you have to unlock it. So, I mean, I guess I was happy after beating the game that there's a new difficulty mode. But then when I go back to it, if I don't have a save file or I'm on a new account or something, it's like, oh come on, I want very hard mode. Oh well.
Yeah, I guess it's a function of developers trying to make sure no one gets too frustrated with a game
that's what
by
I think.
getting in over their head or whatever. But I would be totally fine with having that. I'm like more options. Like don't unlock that kind of thing. Like what are you?
Yeah.
Let someone go back down to normal mode. Let them change the normal mode in the middle of the game. Like that's another thing games have started to do in like maybe the last 10 or so years that didn't used to happen.
Yeah, in Star Ocean 4, when you choose a difficulty, when you finally unlock them all, it says this is the intended challenge that the developers, created for you. And then if you want to have a little bit more difficult time, and then if you go to the hardest mode, it's like if you just want to be brutalized or whatever. So they tell you. So they could just tell you. All right. Your final sin was the final dungeon. You don't like when they're a huge maze. You just don't like when they're mazes, or you also don't like when they're huge?
I guess mazes, like the random final dungeon maze, always bugs me because we've all done that before. They're not fun. I don't think they're fun. Do you think they're fun?
Well, I know that I do prefer them to be really long. In terms of mazes, though,
Okay.
I want to do a really long maze if there are no random battles.
Well, then what? I mean, are you
So-
just like navigating? Is that all
Yeah,
you're...
the navigating is fine. I don't mind having
Okay.
to walk through there, but when you have to stop and do a random battle, it like
Well,
focus.
yeah.
That sucks. Because then, if you're going to be lost in there, it's
Well, here's the other part of why they're so super annoying, especially in games that have like disjointed battlefields where
Yeah.
they warp you to another battlefield.
Oh, I know what
You
you're gonna say.
lose your sense of direction.
Yeah.
Right? So
You get
did I go
disoriented.
around that corner? Did I not go around that corner? And the maze itself is often not that complicated, but when you throw that on top of it and you're lost patience and maybe you're starting to run from battles, you're starting to fight them real sloppy. It's just like, like you're wearing my patience down. That's your final challenge? Come on. The
Yeah.
game was so good up until now. Most games that I played before a certain era had that in some form. Like all PS2, GameCube era role-playing games of note have some sort of late game maze that's meant to sort of whittle your patience down.
Well, whatever they put in the final dungeon, though, whether it a maze or not, I want it to be a thing that takes forever and is really hard. And I suppose over a maze, I would prefer really hard puzzles. Like my favorite feeling when it comes to a long, hard challenge is, of course, a really long boss battle. I like the boss battles to last 30 minutes, personally, not 10, or not like a lot of boss battles these days.
I'm all for that. Yeah.
Yeah, a lot of boss battles these days are only like 4 or 5 minutes. But other than that, in the terms of like dungeon layout, one of my favorite things to have is like a room where what do I do in this room? And you'll be stuck in that room for 30 minutes. That's what I like. Over, wait, which way did I go again? It's better than that, I think.
And not only which way did I go, the screen transition screwed me up. That doesn't feel like intended difficulty.
Yeah, that's not intended, probably.
Maybe it is, but it's dumb. I think it's dumb.
If that's intended, that is dumb. Yeah, I hadn't thought that they would intend to do that.
It might be. It might be that they're trying to trip you up with the random encounters. Because, like I said, the maze is usually not that hard if you could walk through there without battles. It's the fact that you're constantly getting interrupted by battles that makes it hard, which I just think that's obnoxious.
Yeah, and it's way harder when all the rooms look similar.
Yeah, that too.
Okay, I don't know. I prefer. Oh, before I say that, oh man, you got the SNES version of Dragon Quest One. Let me tell you about the original final dungeon in the NES version. It is amazing, and I really like it. So, do you remember? You walk into the castle, and there's a staircase on the left, a staircase on the right, and the throne. And
Yeah.
what you had to do, did you find that on your own, or did you look it up?
No, fuck. By that point, I was like, we gotta get this wrapped up, buddy. I didn't have time to go walking through half that castle, which as I was looking it up, I was like, this is garbage. Like, how would I know to do this?
Yeah, so once again, somebody somewhere told you that there's like a secret behind the throne, and you had to remember it, right? But it is amazing, and it's not what they did in the SNES version, where if you go through like the side staircases, you'll go down. There's like some dead ends, and there are a couple treasure chests, and I believe Erdrick's sword was one of the chests in there. And what they did in the original one was not that though. You go in one of the staircases, and it's a long, twisty-ass, interconnecting maze that if you take every possible path, the only other way you can go eventually is you'll come back up out the other staircase. And so the only and there aren't like awesome treasure chests in that one in the NES version. They put it in the path behind the throne in the NES one. I thought that was awesome. Not you, apparently.
Mean, I guess not. I guess that stuff bugs me more, but I kind of like in my segment, I gave that game a break because it was older, and I felt like, well, what else were they going to do? Like the entire game, even in the version that I played, all of the dungeons were like these sort of survival tests of your preparedness, and that's the thing that I brought up in our initial episode was when you go somewhere or go through a dungeon, it feels more like a journey than other role-playing games because your supplies are constantly ticking down. And navigating these mazes is kind of like a ultra-hard version of that journey. And it makes sense, in my opinion. But for that to be extended to other games where you're just wasting time, you're not going to lose in those other games. You're just wasting time.
Yeah. I see what you're saying. Yeah, you're right. Yeah, in recent games, you don't get, your supplies are not a huge problem in games these days.
Yeah.
So I see what you're saying. The best final dungeon in the world, by the way, I'll just tell you right now, is Alundra. I want the whole world to hear that. The best final dungeon ever is Alundra because it takes everything good about the game thus far and just freaking turns it up to 11. As they say. So if the game is all about puzzles. So you've been solving puzzles the whole game. Like there's no room without a puzzle in that game, dude. And you get to the final thing, and it's just a million puzzles, and you can't unlock one puzzle until you do another puzzle. And also, that game had really good music, and the final dungeon has the best music. Like it's like my dream place to go is that dungeon.
Oh, man. So, yeah, I think that's going to have to be another one on our list for me.
Oh, yeah. You're probably going to hate it.
I don't know. Like I said, with Dragon Warrior, I was able to appreciate what it was doing because I felt like it worked. It made sense for that game. So maybe I'll like it for this if that's really how like the game leans into it that way and it doesn't feel like tacked on. I don't know. We'll see. Maybe I will hate it.
Maybe you will hate it, yeah. Okay. Last sin was my last sin. And, that was pointless treasure chests. And in my mind, a pointless treasure chest is any treasure chest that has, like, a freaking blueberry in it or a freaking healing herb or just, like, occasionally they kind of deceive you and they make you think it's not important by putting, say, what seems like a useless item, but actually that item can be used to make a sweet item later or something. But first time through the game, you won't really know that that's what that's for. And, that's aside. That's another thing. Really, I'm just worried about treasure chests that just generally the contents are not good enough. Overall.
Is it going out of your way and then getting rewarded with something underwhelming that bugs you in this case?
Well, no, because I go out of my way just to find the dead ends. Even right, I want to.
Yeah, I guess that's true.
Yeah, so I'm fine with finding a dead end. I think it's just what do treasure chests stand for, right?
Sure.
I
think I get that. Like, it's a treasure chest. You're putting like some low level garbage in. Why was it in a treasure chest? If it were in something else, would it have been less like egregious to you?
It would be less egregious, yeah. If it's in a bag on the floor, it's not as egregious. I think a game that made me really come to this idea is not an RPG. It's freaking Shadow of the Colossus, which doesn't have treasure chests, as you know.
Yeah.
But you get items from fighting the enemies in time attack, and I don't
think I played Time Attack in that game.
Okay, yeah. If you go to like the crumbled statues. Or even if you play a new game, even before you crumble them, you go pray at the statue, you could just fight that boss instantly with
I
a
forgot
countdown
about
timer.
that.
And if you beat it within like the time that they want you to beat it, you'll get an item. And they're really cool, like exploding arrows and stuff.
Oh, nice.
So it's pretty crazy stuff. And some of them anyway. And I thought, they put this whole world together, and the whole point of it is, well, I don't really know what the whole point of it is, to be honest, because, the guy who made this game, he has his sense of what is art and all that, and I'm not entirely sure what he was trying to create by having a big empty world. But my thought at the time was, why not put those in treasure chests throughout this gigantic world? And it's a huge don't even put clues to them. Just you stumble across a treasure chest, in your travels. And then, you open it up, and all of a sudden you have arrows that explode on impact. You're the happiest person in the world, are you not?
That's interesting. I never really thought about that particular game world having more of a reward for exploration. It was strangely very point to point.
Yes.
Without a lot of, you follow your sword, and occasionally your sword wouldn't glow, so you'd have to explore a little bit if you're in, the woods.
Yeah.
But I guess that was a result of it being a PS2 game. They couldn't really put too much shit in there. But
treasure chests are not hard.
I guess, yeah, you're right. I guess they're not. Did you play, I don't know if I asked you this before, did you play Breath of the Wild on Switch or Wii U?
I have not. I don't have a Switch or a Wii U.
Or a Wii U, okay. I would be curious to see how you would think about that game. Well, you played other 3D Zelda games, or just
and
Zelda
2D.
games.
Yeah, and 2D. Yeah,
and
so
2D.
In Zelda, you get the tools you need to get through the game. And so it's a kind of a huge deal most of the time, right? And there are
a lot of those chests are just like some blue rupees, though.
That's true, yeah. And so, yeah, if it's a small amount, then, yeah, I think it's not worth it. And
but in
it's
particular, with Breath of the Wild, that game has eschewed so much of the original formula that I'd be curious in this instance how that would rub off on you, because a lot of the times you are finding sort of lesser rewards that are in some cases literally disposable weapons that break and you never get them back. So that would probably bug you a lot. In a chest or on the ground.
Yeah, don't want it. No, on the ground is fine. I don't want a disposable weapon from a treasure chest. I mean,
they're all disposable in that game.
Yeah, in Valkyrie Profile they have breakable weapons, but they're insane. So you don't feel like it was like a waste of time to go get that chest. I mean, a waste of time. Yeah, like that chest was a waste of your inventory or whatever, because it's like instantly kill a dragon, and dragons have like 1,000,000 hit points, and there's no way you're gonna kill it without the Dragon Slayer. But 20% chance to break with every hit you do. So
yeah. So this is making me very curious what your full thoughts on Breath of the Wild would be if we were ever able to get you to get your hands on that game. That would be interesting for this channel, I think.
I think it would be too. I'll look into it. It's money is the only problem. I mean,
I know.
Time
well,
too, but...
you, I mean, if you're able to grab one of those for cheap, but time as well. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know. I guess I just really feel like it's a wasted opportunity, because. Like, I'm trying to think of, like, was there any game I played where, like, all of the chests were just like, oh, yeah, I found a treasure chest. I'll bet there's something awesome. And you open it and there's something awesome. Like, I mentioned Dragon Quest VIII. That one was pretty good. Like, finding treasure chests out there was not bad. But still,
Sure.
there were a lot of herbs and things that you didn't
There
need.
were.
So,
They were also not common enough where if you were running around outside and you found one way out in the distance, it was usually like, ooh, it's got to be something good. Or they would have
yeah.
a key in it, and you'd be like, shit, I gotta come back to this.
Exactly. So yeah, you're running around on that huge ass field, and there are only like 4 treasure chests in a gigantic area. Every time you find one, it feels kind of good, and I like how they make them stand out because they're red and orange on a green and blue background, and I really like that feeling when you can see them way in the distance. That game needs a PS4 version.
Yes, it does. Some sort of a remaster needs to be done to that game. Absolutely.
Totally. If they just did the thing that they're doing with the whole PS2 on PS4, where it's kind of emulated and it just looks better, it would be good enough in my opinion.
I think so.
Yeah. Like all the PS2 games that I've played so far look amazing on PS4.
I mean, that one in particular with the cell shading, I played it recently on an emulator. It still looks really good.
Yeah, it does, right? Yeah. Yeah, PS2 games all have like good enough textures that they don't really require updates, just like a up-res, really.
Yeah, some sort of like a basic retooling and up-res.
Yeah. I mean, Zodiac Age is basically that, right? They didn't actually change most of the things, right?
I think in the case of Zodiac Age, there was a situation where that game was actually produced at a higher asset resolution than the PS2 was able to handle. So they had what's called key art for it, I think is what it's called, where they actually just implemented those for the remaster. And they did some work to it. But the PS2 original release was a downscaled version of the game they actually built, which is interesting.
So getting back to the topic, how about the random loot in FF12 chests? What do you think about that?
Oy. Good point. I totally forgot about that, and I'm surprised I didn't even come to my mind because I am still playing through that remaster on the PC. They fixed it a lot for the remaster, but in general, not a fan at all.
Yeah, I like to know what I'm getting.
Super bad. I like to know what I'm getting. Also, I think they tried to fix some of the game with the remaster to the point where they put spells that are only obtainable in treasure chests.
What? Are they 100% though?
They are not.
I guess. Okay, well, wait a minute. I guess they kind of made that game where it's not the kind of game you're supposed to try to get everything because you don't.
But some of those spells are super important, though.
Okay,
some
so
of those
it is
spells
worth
are
it.
really nice and useful, and it's really obnoxious when. Because I played this remaster on the PS4. It came out first there.
Yeah.
I played it not all the way through, but enough of the way through to get a good feel for it.
Yeah.
Then it came out on PC. I started playing it again, and I was like, wait a minute. Because I thought on my first playthrough through the remaster, surely I'm getting these spells out of these chests. These are guaranteed drops. And they're not.
Oh, damn.
Because on the PC, I didn't get them out of the same chest. I was like, I thought this chest had a spell in it. Shit, they want me to run through, zone out, zone in.
Oh,
like,
yeah.
I don't have time for this. Screw it. I'm not getting that damn spell. I don't even know what it was anymore.
So they're not actually missable in that way. You can actually go.
No, you can zone out, zone in. Everything respawns whenever you go back in and out of a zone.
Yeah.
So, yeah, no, not missable, but random all the same. And
what's the point, right?
Fucking just give me the spell.
Yeah.
A lot of these spells were spells you could buy from vendors, but earlier on that they wanted to, I guess, balance the game out better by giving them to you later.
They could just make it at a later vendor.
I know. They retooled a lot of the way you gain access to equipment, including spells, but also accessories that you can buy without getting too far into it in the main town in Ravenaster. And I'm like, wait, am I supposed to get this thing here, that thing there? No, it's probably in some random goddamn treasure coffer out in the middle of the goddamn Giza Plains that no one's going to run to.
Okay, so I know why they did this, though. Their whole goal with what they want the players to experience is that every time you play the game, it can be slightly different, and you don't need all of them as useful as you say they are.
Yeah, that's true.
I guess. So
I think so.
what they want you to the frame of mind they want you to attack it at is like, okay, whatever. I'll just use whatever I have to the best of my ability, kind of thing, right?
That's true. I think that's very true, especially with this game, because this game you have that Zodiac license board, and you can't possibly have assigned everyone to all license boards. Even though everyone has access to 2 boards, there's still more. So
yeah,
I guess that's why. I don't know.
Yeah. Okay. I think we've hit all the sins we want to hit. That's
I
all
think
10
so.
of them. Yeah. So thank you very much to you listening to this. I hope you enjoyed it. Those were our top 10 RPG sins that are still committed to this very day. And thank you very much, Mel, for joining me.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah. And as mentioned in every episode, we still don't have a solid release schedule. So if you want to know when the next one comes out, subscribe and check the subscribe page.
That's it. That's the best way.
That's the best way, yeah. I don't post stuff on Twitter or Facebook or anything, at least yet. Maybe someday when I get serious, I will. But I hate that stuff. So, okay.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, everybody. This has been Turn-Based Memories, Episode 4. Good night.
Good night.